Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. We spent this month covering all sorts of monsters, vampires, werewolves, things that go bump in the night. But the scariest of all monsters, your ones that are nearly universal, your vampires, your werewolves, your creatures that come out of the forest and devour you whole. They're pretty universal. And there's a reason for that. Because unlike the building you see in front of you, where we're all clustered together and pretty safe from the natural, for most of humanity's history, we were anything but. At most, you would have a family or a tribe around you to protect you. And that family and tribe had memories. Indeed, one of the most important things about humans throughout our evolution is our ability to communicate. It's been one of the things that has stumped scientists since the very beginning. Could the Neanderthals communicate? Could the Denisovians communicate? And if so, could they communicate with the same efficiency that we do? Yes, cats and dogs can communicate with each other. Monkeys do communicate to a certain degree. But we're not sure if any of those animals have the same range of expressions and, well, emotions they do have, but the same way to express those ideas that the human voice and spirit has. For example, we know dolphins are highly intelligent. We know they communicate, but we can't learn their language. They can learn ours, but we can't learn theirs. And that's despite scientists working for years on that. I'm pretty sure dolphins have some sort of oral history. They probably tell each other, watch out for propeller blades. That would be a smart thing to remember. It probably took one or two of them going down before they started communicating that. And in the same way, chimpanzees and orangutans and similar hominids, they also communicate to a certain degree. There is the story about the monkey in the Pacific Ocean island archipelago, and she learned to wash her potato in the salt water, and that way it not only got clean, but it also gave it a little bit of a taste. A little bit of salt is something everybody craves. Despite the fact that in the Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic societies, we consume far too much salt, as a general rule, salt is necessary for life. But the weird thing about that monkey that dipped its potato in salt water is that behavior began expanding. So, yes, at first you can explain it, why the monkey is showing the other ones, look what I can do, and it tastes better. But then it started spreading to other islands, where the two had never had any contact with each other. This shows us that there's this kind of subconscious nature to the human element. Behavioral scientists will deny it because it cannot be measured. But that's kind of raison d'etre of behavioral scientists. They can only measure behavior. They can't get into your id, your ego, your subconscious, etc. But in October, we can all agree that whole measurable behavior thing kind of goes out the window. It's almost like a full moon every night for a whole month. And we encourage that. Now, this has a psychological effect on people. It makes us more willing to accept that which is out of our ordinary experience. Let's look at some of the popular myths. Most of the monsters, in quote, that we terrorize ourselves with are cannibals. Yes. Werewolves, the Wendigo, vampires, zombies. They were all once human that have come back to eat humans. And that's one of the things that makes them terrifying. Yes, you get variations on the legend, like the nine-tailed fox in Asia, which it can transform to human and back, which makes it also a cannibal. And that's the frightening thing in all these myths. There's a cannibal coming to eat you, and the scary part is it can disguise itself as a human, so it can be anyone among us. Now, part of this has been exploited by God knows how long for parents. Don't go out or the blank will get you. And it's an effective means of keeping kids in order. I'll grant that to the behavioral scientists. Yes, there is a certain modicum of social control from these myths. But in a tribe or familial situation, social control really only extends as far as survival. And yet these myths date that far back. There's still some uncontacted tribes, like in Sentinel Island off the coast of India or in the Brazilian rainforest. And I guarantee you, they have myths of cannibalism as well. Because despite our modern conceit that colonialism went everywhere, the fact is, these myths were there first. You can go to Easter Island or one of those other cultures that were separated for thousands of years, and they still have some sort of myth of the cannibal among them. Now, why does cannibalism terrify us so much? It's a good question. It's partially because, again, in this nice homogenized situation you see before us, where we live in cozy little places, we don't get to see our food except in nice little shopping bags pre-parceled at the supermarket. That kind of separates us from the natural world. If the bloody squirrel would stop moving around, I'd give you a look at him, but he's too busy and I'm not going to try to focus in on him. But there's a squirrel hopping around out there right now. Now, we're different from squirrels, yes. But a squirrel's everyday life, it knows it has to eat, and there's a chance it will be eaten. Humans are no different than squirrels. Humans have that same basic area of the brain that's designed to keep us alive. The reptilian keeps our heart and lungs going. And the higher functions put in more advanced ideas, such as if I put acorns away today, then, in a couple weeks when it's cold, I'll be able to eat the entire winter. Humans have the exact same mannerisms in their brain. It's just that we have overlaid it more and more so that while we're sitting in our luxury buildings, we kind of lose that connection. But the fear still remains. We know we're only a couple centuries removed from being a lion's prey in the middle of savannah. Because even a couple hundred years ago, if you didn't hit that lion with your first shot, be it an arrow, be it an arquebus, be it a black powder weapon, whatever you have, lion's going to eat you because it's going to take you a minute to repack, restring, pull another bow from your quiver. Whatever you're going to do, it's going to be a minute, and the lion's pretty damn fast. And it's even more terrifying when that lion is one of your own people. The idea that animalistic instinct survives within us. Yes, there have been many tales of cannibalism. I forget what movie it was, about the Olympic team that got stranded in the mountains, and they had to, I think it was alive, I could be wrong. Anyway, that shows us that in every generation, there is a tale of survival that comes at the cost of eating the flesh of others. And there's still a social taboo about it. Yes, it does happen. And I can't fault anybody. Hey, if you're in the middle of nowhere and there's nothing to eat, and you got a dead body there, or even a live one, you got to do what you got to do to stay alive. And that horrible choice is always lurking in the back of our minds. So, the Wendigo, the vampire, the werewolf, the zombie are really human. They've just made the choice to be animalistic, to give in to their hunger. They've gone one step further than we would consider socially acceptable. Now, again, I don't want to cast aspersions on anybody who is possibly in the situation where you had to think about eating a corpse or starving. Hopefully that's a decision I never personally have to make, and nobody in my audience ever has to make. That being said, it's still the order of the day. The cannibal is within us. It isn't this tribal person boiling somebody up in a pot. It's our survival instinct. Just as the squirrel recognizes it must eat and it must accept being eaten. Oh, I can't get him down there. No. He's just a little bit too fast for me today. That's okay. See, I would suck at hunting. Can't even get a picture of the damn squirrel. Don't let me alone in the wild. No, I'm kidding. Would go hungry today, but I would set up traps. But that's the essential horror behind most of the myths that we see. We're not just afraid of being killed, we're also afraid of what we must eat. I mean, how many vegetarians say it? Oh, I can't kill a chicken. Hang on, maybe I can get him this time. There he goes, there he goes. He knows that he has to find something to eat or he's going to be starving, and he has to avoid the cats and the dogs and, the mean people. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's going on in his brain every minute of the day. Does he have higher thoughts? Maybe. I call him Bob. There's a couple squirrels around here. I've named them. Don't judge me. People do weird things. Naming a squirrel is not the weirdest thing, but the black one is Bob, the gray one's Gary, and that's just how we talk about them, so we know which squirrel is which one. Back to the meat of the story. We need a little bit of a comedic break. But the meat of the story is the carnivore within us. There's certain people that, we do want to move beyond it. Vegetarians do it all the time and say, I'm not going to eat meat anymore. They might still eat eggs. Funny story about that. One of Silverlight's closest friends is a very attractive woman. And she's a vegetarian. And she eats eggs. And I said to her one day, how can you eat eggs when you're a vegetarian? And she said to me, and we were in a public place, and she said, it's just like eating sperm. I have no problem eating sperm. I'm just like, yeah, we can't have this conversation anymore. But the reality is my vegetarian friend still realizes she must eat. And in a survival situation, hey, chicken's going down. Now we have documentaries like Supersize This and Supersize This Too that show us the brutal factory conditions that animals go through before they are slaughtered. And there's no questioning it is brutal what happens to these animals. It's a mass manufacturing system. Animals go in one end, products come out the other. And I use the word product on purpose because it's relatively easy for us to go into the supermarket, see a lamb shank, see a ribeye steak, see whatever it is, and we can mentally separate that distance between us being an animal and eating another animal and saying, oh, that's a steak. It gives us that mental fortitude to continue on another day. It's entirely different for farmers that have raised and, taken care of whatever animal it is. Let's just take a lamb, for example. Little Leroy lamb. And little Leroy lamb has a nice life, and Farmer Bob brings him up, and yep, Leroy, you're a year old. It's time that you went off to the factory. You notice that even a farmer doesn't want to kill the animal that he brought up. They tend to send them away because it is traumatic to raise something and kill it. This is why one of the most recurring horror myths, and this goes on in a lot of wars, and this usually happens after a long siege, is that the people inside Masada, inside there are other places the Romans were in, and this myth keeps popping up. It also pops up in the Middle Ages. And they're inside the siege. The soldiers are defending. They're hungry. They're tired. And they smell roasted meat. And they burst in and they find a mother who's cooking her own child. And this myth is viewed with great horror because we're eating one of our own. Just like werewolves do. They're humans that became something else. Vampires do. They're humans that became something else. Zombies. They were once human. They've now become something else. Cannibalism is the ultimate fear because it's so hard to defend against. A lion coming against you, you know what the lion's out for. There's no question. But the human might have been one of your friends. Might have been your own family. So when we look at psychological mechanisms, a lot of the horror myths make sense. The fear of cannibalism kind of dovetails into other things. You take a look at more modern myths like Jason or Michael Myers, where they just kill for the sensation of killing. Yes, most murderers would fall into that profile. It's very rare that you get a Jeffrey Dahmer or in fiction a Hannibal Lecter where somebody's eating somebody else, and it adds to the horror of the mystery. But just the act of murder is all we need to really make somebody frightening. Cannibalism takes it to the next step, but it's still about extinguishing life. And that's where the horror myths come down to. It's really a bunch of monsters that want to do something horrible to you. Now, alien abductions, supposedly they take people away. I was going to do an episode on this, but it's been done to death, so I'm just going to mention it in passing. Alien abductors are basically doing a form of psychological rape without the anal probe. I mean, taking you against your will, performing medical experiments, usually invasive, whether it involves the anal probe or not, that trope's been done to death. The fairies would also abduct you. And again, it's a type of rape. You're being abducted and forced to do something against your will. That, while it doesn't directly correlate with cannibalism, it does show that your body is being used against your will. And this is why most horror falls into what's called body horror, something happening to your body. Because that's what horrifies us all. It's not going to be very scary if I tell you that your electricity has been cut off. No, it can add to the atmosphere, but losing electricity, you got a candle, you got a flashlight, and even if you don't, you wait long enough, someone's going to repair it. There's no horror in that. The question is, while the electricity is out, what happens next? A car accident. Okay, pretty upsetting, pretty traumatic, your body gets hurt and stuff like that. Still not really horrible until I describe what happens next. You're all alone in the wilderness. Now all of a sudden psychological fears start really coming into the forefront. It's cold, it's dark, it's wet, and you can hear all sorts of things moving. Now all those archetypes start bubbling up because you don't have the comfort of that solid building around you. You don't have the comfort of all those people who are going to hear you scream. You're alone. And then the idea that something's going to eat you creeps back into your mind. That's how far we are removed from the animal. I personally read a lot of Ernest Becker, and I suggest you do too. Humanity is the symbolic animal. We are an animal at our core. But there's the symbolic part of us that can communicate with each other. And it's that symbolic part that's what makes us human. The animal part of us, I don't want to pick on anybody here, but you see it every day. People who are just watching TV, eating their meals, going to sleep, getting up, doing what they need to survive, rinse and repeat. Or worse, they are in an asylum or they are in some sort of care, and all they care about is filling their body and doing whatever base desires hit them. Again, trying not to pick on anybody, so I'm leaving it vague. But it's more of an animalistic state. They're not integrated into society. But the animalistic state influences society. We still have to have rules. Thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, because our animalistic side desires all of those things. But even our basic animal instincts don't tell us to eat other humans. We have to overcome them in order to survive in those situations. So for a monster to normalize it in their life, like a vampire, like a werewolf, etc., that's where we find the true horror. They have gone beyond the human. They've gone beyond what a symbolic animal really is. And you don't see dolphins eating each other. You don't see chimpanzees eating each other. Humans do. So the cannibal is ultimately the force behind all of our spookiest Halloween legends. Let's hope forevermore it stays that way. We wish to thank you for joining us for this episode of the Silverlight Show. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, and subscribe. And we hope you have a fantastic day.